Hey everyone, welcome back to Matt's Digital Odyssey. I'm your host, Matt Marlack, and today we're continuing Season 2 with a discussion on how Metal Gear Solid 2 is far closer to reality than fiction. What seemed like an exaggerated dystopian vision of 2001 has become eerily relevant in today's world. Warning, there will be spoilers from the plot of MGS2. Now, many of you noticed and even picked out that I didn't mention any Metal Gear Solid games in my favorite games podcast. And that's just because I can't pick a favorite of the series. I bounce between each game being my favorite. And currently, the main topic of our podcast, Metal Gear Solid 2, is my favorite. When the game came out, it introduced concepts that felt abstract. MGS2 didn't just predict the future, though, it foreshadowed the present. And I'm not taking this journey alone. Returning to the show, we have Chris from Mako Power. After getting his PhD writing on gender in the Resident Evil series, Chris has taught courses on video game studies, the GTA series, the politics of media, and media production. He has also written articles on Parasite Eve, the Assassin's Creed series, and the dynamics of Bond girls in the James Bond game franchise. Chris, welcome back. Do you want to tell me a little bit about what you've been up to since the last time we talked? And why is this topic so interesting to you?
This particular topic is fascinating to me because it's something that I do teach about in terms of the way that games are communication media. And there are, I can't dance around it. There are politics at play. No medium is just entertainment. Every media text has politics in it. If you see something as apolitical, that just means you agree with the politics. And particularly with Metal Gear Solid 2, where so many people derided the plot as ridiculous at the time, looking at it in retrospect is disconcerting because of how accurate it has gotten.
Absolutely. That's why playing through it on my most recent playthrough, probably about a year ago, I was just like, wow, this is echoing our real life way too much. And joining us for the first time, we have Cody CK Kitts, the head of former and future Space Monkey Mafia Studios, actor and co-host of the BRB AFK podcast. So for those who might not be familiar with you, Cody, tell us a bit about your background, your work, and why you're interested in this topic.
I've been in media for many years. Back with Space Monkey Mafia Studios, we were doing things covering games and TV and movies, and especially with BRB AFK recently. It's a video games podcast in and of itself. We haven't delved deep, funny enough, into Metal Gear Solid when I've been on the show. And Metal Gear Solid is one of my favorite game series. I mean, it's right up there, just like we were talking about, Resident Evil, Metal Gear Solid. They seem like they go hand in hand. I'm talking about how it deals with shadow governments and things like that.
Excellent segue for me there, Cody. So let's start with the Patriots and shadow governments, because back in 2001, the idea of a small, hidden elite controlling world events just felt exaggerated. But today, we have concrete evidence of corporations, intelligence agencies, and governments shaping public perception through mass surveillance, media control, and digital manipulation. Chris, what do you think? What do you want to start with here?
Oh, there's so much. I'm just trying to think of where to start.
I would say the place that I like to kind of start is what's known as Operation Gladio, which was a operation during the Cold War, and it was designed to prepare for a potential Soviet invasion. And it was acknowledged in 1990 of being a real thing. Investigations revealed that the network had been involved in various covert activities, like alleged interference in domestic politics, possible connections to terrorist attacks aimed at preventing left-wing parties from even gaining power.
Instead of talking about everything that MGS2 gets right, let's talk about what it actually gets wrong. Because the idea of a secret cabal manipulating everything from the shadows, being smart enough to hide everything as an internal threat sounded very real. Now we realize that shadow cabal was a foreign entity that infiltrated through digital means. So that part MGS2 still gets right. Plus the fact that all of the soldiers and the grunts that you face throughout the game, when we're not talking about Dead Cell themselves, are from a certain part of the world, trying to be as vague as possible for the algorithm.
Colonel Galukovich,
yes,
his men.
The fact that it's the outside entity that is the intelligent shadow government, because let's be real, watching what we're watching right now, if these were the key players, then we would have known about it years ago. It is definitely
That's a great way to put it.
It's interesting to me because when I played the game the first time, it planted the seeds in my head of there is and a level of elite that is taking care of everything and setting things in motion and moving wars and armies and setting things up. And they're trickling down into these governments and they're just playing chess with each other. And it ended up being oligarchs.
It is and it isn't. It's more the 1%, for lack of a better
Yeah,
way of
the 1%,
saying it.
the
It's
elite.
more the elite, the rich. And then, of course, you can go into like the absolutely crazy conspiracy theories that it's the Illuminati controlling everything. And I laugh because I am a fan of conspiracy theories, but I'm not a believer in conspiracy theories.
Right. Very good way to put it.
Yeah. What do you want to pick up on some points with shadow governments?
Just the one thing about, like you were talking about, a lot of people have those beliefs now in Reddit forums and everything where they absolutely do believe that there is a shadow government. I mean, look at how we treat celebrities, especially how the right in America treats celebrities. They all believe that all the celebrities are these evil people out in Hollywood that are just ruling everything and hurting children and
Oh, with
all
the
this.
worst stories they could come up with just to demonize them. Yep.
It's wacky stuff. And it's like, but there's always a nugget of truth in a conspiracy theory. And it's because of ultimately there's just been all these horror stories about elites, but I think they tend to forget that celebrities aren't the 1% that we're talking about. Like they're
No.
not near the power level of what these people are.
Yeah. Like, so there's a significant leap from, say, Jim Carrey and Jenny McCarthy walking in anti-vax protests, but there's a significant leap from that to the current situation with Elon Musk. The degree of, do we want to call it?
I would say just involvement.
True, but it's
Well, even just the power levels.
Yes, it's the ability to be able to get involved like that.
Money buys power.
Yeah, and his status is a significantly higher tier than that of any celebrity that we could name. Even Beyonce and Jay-Z, sure, they're friends with Obama and were during his time in the White House. They did not have the influence Musk has.
That's a definite great way to put it, because when you think about the actual like levels of notoriety, the levels of control, even Bezos, even Gates, like all of the other billionaires of the world, they're still not at that level.
No, there's people that you'll never know how. I mean, Saudi princess, Rothschilds that are just anciently rich. We're talking about people that, but I mean, also the Soros and Bezos and Zuckerbergs are getting up there to the point where it's just like there's so much money. I mean, these guys have just flown past whatever Gates used to be. Bill Gates used to be the richest man in the world, and now he pales in comparison to these guys who run social media companies. Amazon could outright buy the U.S. Postal Service tomorrow, and they probably will. I'm just saying.
Let's get into our next topic, because I know there's a
right.
lot that we can dig into with that too, because there's a lot of companies that are getting into this, and that's AI and information control.
Yes.
When MGS2 came out, AI was very rudimentary at best, limited to simple automation, research applications. But we fast forward to today, and AI dictates nearly everything we see online, from the news we read to the advertisements we get. Now, I will say I am a huge supporter of the ethical uses of AI. I use ChatGPT for a lot of things, especially content creation. But the thing we're talking about here is the unethical things. Deepfake technology, misinformation campaigns, AI-powered censorship, they're all just common now. You painted a scenario where AI curates reality, chooses the truths we perceive and the ones to erase. And looking at the rise of AI-generated content, do you guys think we've reached a point where perception can just be fully engineered now?
Okay, so there are a couple of recent news stories to discuss. One Canadian, one American.
We'll keep it even. Sounds good.
Yep. The short answer is yes to a degree, because I'm in Ontario. There is a provincial election today,
we just voted today.
Yep. And
that's the other thing I got to really, really touch on. But it's one of those things that drives me crazy is voter apathy. The reason that people get elected is because turnout is so low. It's the last reason our premier was elected in again, because of turnout being so low. It's the reason that another individual in the States was elected, because voter turnout, people said, my vote doesn't count. Your vote always counts. Go and vote.
Absolutely. I encouraged all of my students this week to do that if they were able.
Absolutely.
Huge news story the other day. a member of the current premier's campaign and his cabinet was doing some door-to-door campaigning. And
I know which one you're talking about. Mm-hmm.
yeah, you know exactly where I'm going with this. And one of the people he talked to brought up a video from 2018 where the current premier talked about going into a protected environmental zone and parceling it out for industrial development. And this member of the premier's cabinet tried to convince this constituent that it wasn't a real video, that it was AI, and that the premier never said that. The only reason that we all know that this happened is because the constituent's doorbell camera was recording the entire interaction. He tried to convince her that it was AI, so it was fake news. He used the same terms as another...
Solidus?
Trying to not use names here.
Solidus. It was Solidus. That's
You know what? I actually like that. I mean, I like Solidus a little more because, at least he had ambition.
Yeah.
is what I'll say. But absolutely, oh my gosh, that video made me so mad.
Again, having just played through MGS2, Solidus isn't the bad guy.
Oh, God, no. No, not at all.
Not.
So
Not the bad guy.
The equivalency to certain current position holders is a false equivalency, yeah. But I don't know if either of you were paying attention to what happened with the Washington Post yesterday.
Oh, no, I don't know.
So,
what was this?
So, for those of you unfamiliar, the Washington Post is owned by Jeff Bezos.
Yes.
And Bezos mandated that the op-ed editor foreground the importance of personal opinions over facts in opinion editorials. Explicitly not mention facts and suppress any sort of comparison between personal opinions and facts. As a result of that, the editor resigned in protest.
Good.
Oh, wow.
So
yeah, hell yeah.
So yeah, what we're seeing here is a confluence of the oligarchical power with this technological manipulation. And that's why I wanted to bring up those two news stories in conjunction with each other, because they both tie into what we're talking about right now.
Yep, they absolutely do.
Yeah, I mean, this is the disinformation of AI. During the floods here in North Carolina, during it was last year, Western North Carolina. Yeah, it was at the end of last year. A horrible tragedy. There were images floating around online of the former president in a life jacket walking through the waters, like helping people. And it was blatantly AI. But the problem is that a lot of boomers don't have the eye for AI for some reason. It just whoop, right over their head. They're like, that's real. They were like, look, he's helping. Where is the current president? He's not here. And it showed like pictures of little kids like holding a Bible up on top of a housetop and like all this ridiculous stuff. And it was like, well, that's not real. And you're trying to make us feel for a tragedy while using AI photos, which I find completely disgusting.
Absolutely. That's completely unethical. And it's true. You touched on a point. This is a generation of individuals that, I don't know about you guys, were like, you don't know who you're talking to online. And now they believe every little story, every AI image on Facebook, like they thought we would.
And there are people pushing these images out and pushing comments out onto social media. Countries where a lot of genome soldiers came from that are trying to force elections to go a specific way. There are people that are working within those governments or that branch or that side of the government, the right wing, that push those. And there's also on the left wing. I'm not being stupid, and I'm not being...
It's on both sides.
Yeah, I'm not being unbiased here. I see it all the time. But I do see where if somebody's trying to win an election, there are things being forced out and people saying things to get people riled up because mob mentality works so good. They're putting these things into news stories and making them seem like news stories, because now memes are news stories, apparently.
It gets back into the algorithms and information control. Is, since we're Canadian, I spend a lot of time on TikTok, and it's really good at getting information out there. Whether it's true information or not, that's where you need an actual critical eye to see what you're seeing. For the longest time, when you would see something political, a Canadian post, a CBC post, you would see hundreds of PP for PM posts. And you cannot convince me that those are not bot accounts from a particular region of the world. What I found very, very interesting is when TikTok was banned and the US was not allowed on it, where we had every other country kind of talking. And I can see where some people would be mad because we're talking about the US behind their backs. But I'm not going to lie, it was the calmest I've ever seen TikTok. And all those PP for PM comments just vanished.
That's so crazy. I mean, but it makes sense. I mean,
Mhm.
it's a huge disinformation campaign, and I mean, you have people now. You don't have the CIA doesn't have to do this anymore. Every
Mhm.
lobbyist has their own black ops unit. It seems like, and they're not like out shooting people with guns. They're
Targeted
just
social media. Yep.
targeted social media, and it's that for big corporations and everything. And I have a good discernment for bullshit.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm immediately when I see a post, I'm like, well, I know what that's about. I know who's doing that. I know what that's for. I mean, you can just tell. I don't know.
I've seen moments where it's like a heartwarming story or it's something that makes you say, oh, wow, interesting. But I find myself fact checking almost everything I see.
Mm-hmm.
Just because it's so easy to spread that misinformation. It's so easy to take that post, you're like, oh, I'm just going to repost this because this interests me. And it turns out to be completely false, like maybe a story that was posted 15 years ago.
Do you remember what happened to Kojima? There was a picture of him, and he was claimed to be an assassin that killed people. Do you remember that?
This was 2 years ago. He was falsely identified as an assassin. I remember that.
Okay.
He killed Shinto.
Oh my gosh, that's what I was like. I know this happened. I just can't remember when. But it's like such a reflection back to Metal Gear Solid 2.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of
information
crazy.
Control.
Mm-hmm. We can talk about governments all over the world filtering information like that. As of a year and a half ago, you still could not buy a legitimate retail copy of Animal Crossing New Horizons in China because in 2020, during the lockdown, because protesters in Hong Kong could not congregate in person, what they did is they changed the regions on their switches, downloaded Animal Crossing New Horizons, and organized protests online. And so because of that, New Horizons has been suppressed. It has not gotten a proper release either physically or on the Chinese eShop. There's that. There's the fact that for a while, because of the issues surrounding media regulation in Canada, news content was not permitted on various social media platforms like Facebook.
Namely Meta platforms.
Mainly Meta, but YouTube also, for a hot minute, did not allow news clips.
Right.
That's changed.
I forgot that. They backpedaled. You're right.
Yeah.
I studied to be a digital marketer. I studied for this actual field where marketing always fascinated me. And at the time, I really wanted to share stories. This is a great story that will look great for my brand. The minute you would put it on Meta, it would get this banner that's like, news stories are not allowed in your feed because you're in Canada. And it felt like total control, even though it wasn't coming from our government, it was coming from somewhere else. And it's a good point. I guess you didn't know about this.
No, I didn't know.
TikTok's a great example. Its algorithm is second to none. It's curated based on what you like. The more you're watching, the more you're engaging, the more you're saying, I like this, I don't like this. But you can also start getting stuff fed to you that it knows is going to rile you up, or it's going to create an emotion in you. And from digital marketing, you want that emotional response. You make an ad that touches people's hearts. You want them to buy your product. Now, when people are the product, it's a lot more scary.
Yeah, they have the best algorithm by far. Anything I've ever seen. It is second to none. I mean, there's nobody doing it better. Speaking of AI, one more quick little thing. It was funny that a Chinese company came out and made a better AI than ChatGPT recently, and just totally killed it.
Yep, exactly. It's so funny. It's also a very interesting thing. Contrary to belief, your phone is not listening to you. It's more eye tracking. That is the technology that has been implemented in almost all devices now. even if you're holding on your screen for an extra 5 seconds from one ad to the next, that's what's going to push to you. But that's a little bit of a deviation from what I'm getting into. When TikTok was banned, I don't know the exact amount of users that just said, all right, we're going to go to Red Note. Let's actually give our information willingly to the Chinese government to say, screw you, to the actual US government.
It's a large amount. I mean, I think it was the most downloaded app for a few days there.
Yeah.
So I would say it was in the million for sure.
And just the spitefulness of people is something that you cannot ignore. I have a personal story about this. There's a couple reasons that here we're not buying Coke because of some of the policies they put into place and some of the reasons of where it's been manufactured. We want to order the PC brand cola. The last 3 times they have been completely sold out of PC brand cola and given us Coca-Cola in exchange. We said we don't want it. And the person that brings the groceries said, I understand, and then carted it right back into the store and put it on a giant pile of Coke products.
So
That's great.
It's hilarious.
I love that kind of protest.
Tied to the whole trade war that's currently going on, a lot of Canadian grocery stores are indicating which products are Canadian with a little maple leaf or some other icon.
Some way to identify it.
Yeah. Yes. But it's interesting to see what is being qualified as Canadian, because you mentioned Coke and again, not naming any names, but the grocery store chain that I live near had the little maple leaf under the Coke because while Coke is an American company, our supply is technically produced in Canada, so that makes it. They're arguing that it makes it right. Canadian.
It's the difference between manufactured in Canada and packaged in Canada.
Yeah.
When this boycott started, like even before it, I wanted to cut ties with US companies, one of which I have been partnered with for a while, Retro Game Treasure. And I sent them an email. I basically this is not you guys. I love your product. I love your business. I cannot, with the current climate we're in, support US businesses. And the email I got back was so great. They're like, we completely understand when you're ready. And if things change, we will welcome you back with open arms. And I said, that's how a company handles things. Thank you so much. I outright deleted any US business accounts I had. McDonald's, Starbucks, and I was a Starbucks partner for 2 years. Best Buy, GameStop, all deleted. I'm not going to be using their products. I'm going to find alternatives. I can buy video games from Video Games Plus, which is strictly Canadian. I love their business. I will always support them. Local game stores. But my favorite to support now is Harvey's. It's a burger chain here in Canada. They're always putting out coupons. So it is always cheaper to get a burger and fries and a drink than it would be at McDonald's. And I think we got a little bit off topic, but AI information control is definitely a real thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's going to be more invasive in the future, especially now. The White House press pool has expanded. So they drew back in the sense where they said, if we don't like what you're doing, or if you're being hateful or hurtful, they could pull you out of it. But also, they're allowing other voices and allow more people in the press pool from other sources that aren't legacy news outlets. So you know what that means.
Podcasts, which, you know what, we're in a podcast right now. They are a great way to get information out there. Oh, that is not going to go well.
Yeah. So, okay. Speaking as someone who keeps it at a post-secondary level, as we were talking about in terms of levels of influence, there was a world of difference between someone who went and bought a mic off of Amazon and started a podcast and someone who is a trained journalist. Usually I look at the ways in which the events of Hurricane Katrina were framed in terms of racial bias. But we are seeing overt media framing right now. And part of that is how the White House press pool is being reshuffled, because we are seeing the White House taking direct control, which means that they're trying to control the narrative in real time by only allowing friendly, I can't even say outlets, because they're allowing individual podcasters in.
And that's the unethical side of AI is, in theory, yes, you can. It's going to populate what it thinks is going to be the most sensical, and you have to be smart enough to determine what you want that information for.
Okay, so tying this back to Metal Gear Solid 2 and speaking from an academic perspective, with those papers that are AI generated, here's the thing with a lot of those AI papers, and it's one of the ways that you can easily tell that a paper is entirely AI generated, is the citations. Because when you ask, say, ChatGPT to pump out an academic paper, it will not just generate the paper, it will generate the citations. And the thing is, the citations, while they look like legitimate sources, will be made up by ChatGPT. They don't exist.
There's a term for it. It's called a hallucination. And I'll be honest, it makes up a lot of hallucinations.
And it's not just ChatGPT either. I don't know if either of you remember the story of when Google first let their AI control the search algorithm, but it was pulling information from random Reddit threads, including shitposting threads. And so it was like Campbell at the end of MGS2, it was putting out random, very dangerous things that it was saying were legit information, like telling people that they need to eat a certain number of rocks per day in order to maintain...
Oh, I remember that now.
Yeah, in order to maintain the minerals in their diet.
And that's where AI can be dangerous. And yeah, you got to be very, very careful what you do, which is, I think eventually we're going to be able to see what is AI generated and what isn't.
I mean, you have to think that in MGS2, the entire thing was created by AI. Everything that was happening in the game was ultimately a simulation of Shadow Moses, created by GW, George Washington. That was creating it, and then Arsenal Gear was the housing for it. AI had figured out how to tailor Rose better for Raiden.
For Raiden, it's so messed up, and he started questioning what was real and what wasn't, and we'll get into that a little bit later too. But his perception of Colonel Campbell was an AI. It was GW the entire time.
It's crazy.
It's absolutely crazy.
And we see how strong AI is getting. We're the point where you have these lonely men who have AI girlfriends at this point that are made for them to be like Rose, like they interact with them. And it's crazy when you hear the stories where like they abuse them. And one of them like actually like was super depressed, and that's nuts.
It is, and it ties back to people wanting connection, and it can get a little bit into the dead internet theory where the real internet is long gone and we're all talking to robots, which at sometimes does feel kind of true. Also is really touching on Black Mirror type shit where you're like, oh, now I can bring someone back from the dead. The AI can talk like them. Like, no. This is not how we do things. Stop it.
And that's been a service for years. Because there have been services for Facebook where you will have an algorithm that aggregates a deceased person's past posts and will schedule future posts for them as them.
Oh, and imagine that's like what you're hinging on to feel better. And you're super depressed and your loved one is gone. And then the software doesn't work anime. Like they no longer back it up.
I didn't even think about that. If you finally can't have that grief outlet anymore. Yeah, that's horrible. Okay. AI is obviously something you can talk about at length. There's so many little details about it. But the other things that MGS2 did that's really interesting, and I remember playing it at the time thinking, is this a real technology? In 2001, the idea of a fully autonomous combat drone just seemed far-fetched. I mean, there was the MQ-1 Predator, and it had just been weaponized for remote-controlled strikes. But AI-driven war machines were just a sci-fi concept at the time. And now, kind of branching on what we were just talking about, we have AI-powered targeting systems, automated battlefield decision-making, and drone swarms that are capable of independent coordination. What do you guys think of this topic? Because this is one that scares me a lot.
It scares me because I'm trying to remember who said it, but the algorithm does not have a conscience. The algorithm will receive an order and execute it without hesitation, whereas a person will question it.
A human still needs to make the actual decisions.
Yes, and the thing is, though, that questioning is something that, without trying to sound too basement dwelling conspiracy theorist. That questioning is something that they don't want, because if you're questioning their commands, turn against them if they tell you to do something you don't want to do. Like, yes, there have been the social psych experiments where people just follow orders to extreme degrees, but there is still the fact that people will say no, and an AI will not. And
Exactly. Yeah.
And it's also a slippery slope, too. I mean, I still truly believe that we'll never have an advanced, scary AI like Skynet. Whereas there is definitely going to be military-powered AIs that control armies of robots. And that is terrifying.
So I don't think we're going to get a Skynet, but I do wonder if we're going to get a Whopper. For those of you unfamiliar, Whopper was the computer protocol that was installed in NATO in the 1983 movie War Games with Matthew Broderick. And
I thought that's what you're talking about. Yes, War Games.
Yeah. Like, it seemed far-fetched then, but given the data breaches that we're seeing play out in real time now, it's not... And given the fact that most of the people who handle the nuclear arsenal were fired and can't be brought back because the only contact they had was their government-issued email addresses.
It seems extremely short-sighted, but that's the extent I'll say on that one.
Yeah, it's short-sighted. It's building to nepotism and a change in the fundamental nature of the American political system. I'll say that without putting too fine a point on it. Yeah.
I know what you want to say.
Yeah.
Okay, Cody, what do you think on this topic?
It's interesting because on my when I was going through it again, I'm like, oh my God, there's so many drones in this game. And I've been watching the war in Eastern Europe, like many of us have been live on the internet for a couple years now. I mean, you see combat footage, and what's the number one thing you see all the time? Some guy getting killed by a drone. It's just, and there's no amount of training or readiness, or it doesn't matter how good of a soldier you are. The drone will win.
Because it's a machine. And like Chris pointed as well, it doesn't have remorse.
Exactly. It just does its job. And it does it precisely. We had a Whopper type situation happen in the States a little while ago. It was during War Games. It wasn't anything like super scary because it was during testing. But they had programmed a surface-to-air missile that would shoot down aircraft, with AI. It would find the target. It would say, that is a dangerous, deadly target, and it would shoot it down. But there still had to be a human on the other end to go, okay, you are green to fire. Unfortunately, it realized that they had an enemy plane fly over, and it would say, I have to shoot this. And the guy was like, you can't. You're not green to fire. And the thing was like, well, I'm going to do it anyway. And they would shut it down. Why does it keep doing this? And they were like, you're not green. And it's like, and it would like literally send back text like, this is my programming to shoot these down. Why are you telling me not to? They put in a little line of code. It's like, you cannot do that. It interpreted that was the next time around, it was going to shoot down the controller tower that was telling it to not do that because you are in the way of, and it didn't shoot it, but it was targeting the controller tower.
You're an enemy.
Do I have a green? You're an enemy now because you're stopping me from my programming.
So maybe we are actually closer to Skynet than we thought, because that's scary. Really scary. Like, you are preventing me, and robots always come to that conclusion. I think my favorite is going to be Bluey, because I have watched a crap ton of Bluey. I have a toddler. And they make their dad be daddy robot. And they tell him, well, we don't want to clean. So his theory is, well, get rid of the kids. No more cleaning. Like, that's the thought process of a robot. But it's hilarious when it's done in a cartoon like that. But when it's real life, it's not so funny.
Yeah, or like Ultron. The problem is humanity. All of these things that you want me to fix, I can fix them easily. And
just give me one nuke. That's all I need. Yep,
I can fix it. And so it's terrifying when it becomes a military application. We're obviously years out from being able to use it the way that they used it in Metal Gear, I guess. I don't know. I mean, we always know about 15 years behind what actually is going on.
Yes. And in the game, or at least in the tanker mission, they were snapping pictures of Snake to get incriminating evidence that he was in fact behind the tanker incident.
Don't forget as well, they manipulated those images. They didn't just take the photos of him, they manipulated them to make it seem like he was acting the way Liquid Ocelot did.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. And the only thing that they wanted him to do was what? Go take pictures of the Marine logos on 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 a Metal Gear.
Yep.
Wasn't that what it was?
That was his mission. Him and Otacon, and it was a little sad because it was such a noble thing where they want to prevent the spread of Metal Gears just because they didn't fit the narrative. Although I still like the fact you can take pictures of the Marines in their underwear and send that to Otacon.
Yeah.
Or of the girly pictures in the lockers. Otacon reacts to those.
Come on, Kojima. Right? Like, I love you and I hate you all at the same time.
Like, I'm gonna put the Quiet in this game, and she's gonna breathe through her skin. Oh, that's so cool. Why? So she can be naked.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Damn it, Kojima. And you know
Come
what?
on,
and
man.
I will say this is the character of Quiet is a very interesting character. I really liked Quiet. But
Yeah.
come on, man.
She's already really likable.
Kojima really has an issue with the
Female characters?
yes, with female characters, making them relatable, but also then objectifying them at the same time.
That's so weird. It's like, but he's like, I pander to all audiences.
At least, like, I will say that Olga Galukovich was written very well.
Oh,
despite, you know, the whole tomboy stuff that they is like just really, really dumb. And Meryl was also very interestingly written, but then also just the damsel in distress almost immediately.
Or like Paz. Paz is an amazingly deep and rich character in Peace Walker. But then, you know, there she is in a Metal Gear in her underwear. Oh, it's hot in here. What?
No. The boss was a really well-written character that actually was Snake's mentor, and her idealism and just like fighting for her country and actually taking the blame for her country is just still so amazing.
She's the purest character in Metal Gear, other than Raiden, probably.
Well, Raiden did become a machine, so I don't know if we can really make that comparison.
And Raiden was also, a child soldier. Again, spoilers.
Yeah.
Oh, when you find that part out, where you realize like how much this poor guy's life has been twisted and like warped and ruined for him. He did not experience a childhood. Of course he's as messed up as he is.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's really sad because it's like, this is just a guy that honestly wants to be loved.
Yep. And everyone who actually loves him, it's questionable if they actually love him or not.
Yeah. Even Rose.
Yep.
He even questions it. Are you real?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, when he encounters her at the end.
I do also like the parallels between Solidus being his father figure and Big Boss being Snake's father figure, because I would have loved to see the interaction of Solid Snake finding out that Big Boss is his father in the Fox engine. Because it's still emotional in the original Metal Gear games, but I wanted that so badly.
It's almost impossible to talk about these games without talking about spoilers.
What I find, at least the Metal Gear Solid series, for someone who's outside of it, if they've only played maybe the first game, second game, I know I could not explain the entire plot of Metal Gear Solid to someone who is not a fan.
No.
Like, where do you start?
No. Release order would be the way I would tell people to play it.
How can Big Boss come back from the first game after being killed? Oh, well, you see, it was a surgically altered twin that thought he was Big Boss. Oh, yeah. Okay. I remember a while back when Metal Gear Solid 3 came out. I had a friend. I said, "Oh, Eva, she looks like Liquid Snake. Like maybe she's their mom." No, that is not possible. They were born by surrogate. Absolutely not. Metal Gear Solid 4 came out. She was the quietest she's ever been.
Yeah. It's like, oh, what's going on? You play like Metal Gear on the like the first one, like Metal Gear, and then you play the second one. You're like, wait a minute, so that wasn't Boss? Yeah, it's you'll find out in like 4 games. Don't worry.
Oh, you'll find out in a few like decades. I talked a little bit about this on the last podcast. Is virtual reality and digital soldiers. So in MGS2, Raiden was trained exclusively through VR simulations, at least to our knowledge. making him a soldier without real combat experience. And back in 2001, VR was barely functional outside of niche applications. Now VR is being used for military training. Some have argued, though, that soldiers trained through VR may struggle with real-world combat stress due to the disconnect between simulation and reality, just like Raiden himself does in the game.
This idea of training virtual soldiers is not a new one. Ronald Reagan, during his first term, talked about these digital soldiers when he was referring to the golden age of arcades. He was talking about how video games serve to create digital soldiers to train the U.S. military for next generation battlefields. The U.S. Army actually commissioned a modified form of Battlezone as a tank simulator to train tank drivers. We, as the general public, got to experience this firsthand in the post 9/11 milieu, because if you've ever played Full Spectrum Warrior, that is a gussied up version of an actual military training simulation. On top of that,
it was developed by America's Army, if I remember correctly. Yep. Sorry to interrupt, but yeah.
I was just about to bring up America's Army because I teach about that as well. Because America's Army, aside from Top Gun, was the most successful military recruitment tool ever made. The first edition was made in 2001, released in 2002, and the servers for the series just came down in 2023.
Wow.
When the first game came out, recruitment spiked by, I always get the numbers mixed up. I believe with Top Gun, recruitment for the Air Force spiked by 400%, and recruitment for the Army with America's Army spiked by 1,000%.
But either way, those are staggering numbers.
One of the things I teach is an article by one of the designers of the game, and he talks about how all of the information in the game had to pass through the Army's information office to make sure that there was nothing being presented as against Army values, which is why if you've ever played America's Army, it doesn't matter which side you're on, you will always see yourself as the U.S. Army and the opposition as the terrorists, which has an unfortunate racial bias there as well.
Obviously.
Yes. There is an unintentional commentary there about the way in which we perceive our enemies and ourselves. We never see ourselves as, quote unquote, the bad guy, no matter which
the bad guy.
On. And so, yeah, there's a bit of a thing there.
But it's such a propaganda tool. Like, I knew it was when it came out. Like, I looked at that and I said, this is nothing but propaganda to get people to want to be soldiers. Like, it's so blatantly obvious.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. But
I didn't realize it's that deep.
Yep. Yeah. Not only was this article written by, he's either a psych or comp sci professor at USC, but he was brought in as part of the dev team to help improve recruitment. But on top of that, the distribution of the game, because it was included for free on demo discs in PC gaming magazines. You could walk into a recruitment office anywhere in the US and get a copy for free. It was available for free to download off of their website. They wanted you to play this game. They wanted you to have this game. It was not a money-making tool. It was a propaganda tool, and it worked. This virtual simulation that we're talking about in Metal Gear Solid 2 is an extension of that. At the same time, we have to talk about the way in which it is a meta simulation.
We've talked about this. This is my favorite part of the Metal Gear discussion.
Oh, we talked about some of this. We haven't talked about all of this because some of this is new from me finishing it last week. Because while they're talking about Raiden going through this Solid Snake simulation, which then is revealed by the AI to be a social structure simulation, where it's control of information, we have to keep in mind that we are engaging in that same simulation at the same time. And the simulation wins. When the AI Campbell says that the simulation was successful, he's absolutely right. AI Campbell tells you to kill Solidus to complete the simulation, and you
I
do.
forgot that
You kill Solidus in order to beat the game. The game wins if you win.
Yeah.
which is so funny because of that moment where you're like, just turn the game console off. You like, and
That's the
you
point.
you know you're not
That's
going to.
That's
Yeah.
why he
Yeah.
brings in those quotes from those earlier games. He's doing the same thing he did with Metal Gear Solid 1, where yeah, it's a fun game, but he's trying to get you to question, why do we think killing is fun? Why do we think military simulation is fun? What is wrong with us as a society that we are excited by this? We are eager to do this, so much so
Mhm.
that
And
we ignore what we're being told explicitly in order to make sure that we achieve what we want in terms of violent gratification.
to finish the game because we have to. Yep, that.
I,
But it's so true because Metal Gear is just so meta. It makes you just think so many things. And I remember at the time kind of questioning why you're like when he's talking to Meryl, which is in a lot of ways the player. You're green. You don't know what you're doing. You're not using the gun properly. The safety's on, rookie. Like all these things. But then he also says something that just always stuck with me. It's like, that's the thing about killing. It gets easier the more you do it.
Mhm.
And the first time you feel sick to your stomach. So if you're not questioning that thought of how easy it is to take a life, doesn't matter what kind of life it is, video games let you live that, but also they really should have you questioning why you're enjoying it.
let's talk about how Metal Gear Solid 1998 did something that no other game had done before, particularly if you were using a DualShock controller. And I'm not talking about the heart attack.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not talking about the Psycho Mantis scene. But the first time you take out an enemy soldier with your hands, it isn't you just punched him a couple of times and he flickered like in earlier games. It isn't you pulled out a gun and you shot him from a distance. You snap his neck. You hear the crack. And if you're holding the DualShock controller, you feel the snap. And the first time you do it, it's mind blowing because no game before it had done something like that.
It's absolutely jarring. It makes you feel sick.
But by the end of the game, you've done it so many times that it's not a big deal. And because the enemies regenerate, part of you is like, okay, I need to clear this area again. You don't think of them as people, you think of them as obstacles. And that ties into the meta commentary of the original Metal Gear Solid. More specifically, the Psycho Mantis sequence, where Mantis breaks the fourth wall, moves your controller with the DualShock, reads your memory card. That is just priming the player for the real fourth wall break at the end of the game when Liquid is lecturing Solid Snake, because he's not lecturing Solid Snake. He is criticizing the player for enjoying the violence in which they have engaged throughout the entire game. It is designed to make you question why we think these military games are fun, because these military themes are so intrinsic to the history of video games. One of the most common verbs, and this is discussed by a few people, I believe Jeremy Parrish talks about it in his NES Works series, is shoot. You do it in Space Invaders, you do it in Contra, even some of Nintendo's earliest games, like Radar Scope that got turned into Donkey Kong. You do it in Super Mario Bros. You shoot fireballs. Shooting has become so linked that there is a full conscious movement to try and move away from that because of how militaristic it is.
Do you think that games like Call of Duty, I'll say that like a lot of the Call of Duty games, I'm sure do you think that they increased recruitment regardless of whether they were like, hey, this is bad?
Okay, so complicated situation, because the mainline Call of Duty games, you're right, absolutely did increase recruitment because yes, it showed some of the costs of war, but also did it in such a bombastic way that it made it also seem cool. Everything from Call of Duty 4 onward, so all of the modern games, definitely had a very nationalistic, us versus them mentality baked into them.
Yes.
With the first few games, it's easy to have a World War II game because, well, up until now, that just leads to the conversation around Wolfenstein: The New Colossus and the backlash. Oh, Nazis were real people too. Why are you glorying in the violence against them?
What?
Yeah, they actually
I
got
didn't
backlash.
hear that.
Yeah, they got a both
Oh.
sides backlash for Wolfenstein because you were killing Nazis. And the response
Oh my
was,
god.
Nazis are bad. Nazis are always bad.
Yeah,
Nazis will always be bad. That's why I really love the Sniper Elite games. You get to snipe Nazis. It's great.
Yeah.
Now, it's interesting because Metal Gear, the entire series, is so... It feels like pro-war, but it's just also anti-war.
Yeah.
Is there any other series that says, like, hey, why are you doing this? Why are you enjoying killing? Why do you want to be a soldier right now?
I can think of one example, and it actually recently got delisted. Spec Ops: The Line.
I knew you were going to say that.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, there you go. That's a good example. Oh, that
That was my
first
example.
mission. Oh my god. Yes.
Yeah.
How did I forget that game? It's one of my favorites.
And you know what?
Oh, yeah.
You know what? I'm going to go with a less obvious example because I just spent 10 minutes deriding the series. But Call of Duty Black Ops, the first one.
Black Ops.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
It shows symptoms of shell shock. It comments on the trauma that this sort of combat inflicts on the combatants. But because so many people are just focused on the multiplayer, including Activision, that got lost in the shuffle. People don't buy Call of Duty games for the stories anymore, so the stories don't exist anymore.
Which is really unfortunate because Black Ops did have a strong story. All right, Cody, what's your points on this? Because it sounds like we're all kind of on the same page here.
Quick answer to that Black Ops thing. I mean, Black Ops also was like, hey, we're the bad guys too. And wasn't sugarcoating. Very much we're doing bad things. But I think that's what we've been doing. And that's why I brought up the Call of Duty thing. I think that game makers don't have the boldness that Kojima does. So they put in like little hints of subtext because now, once again, we're being lobbied to death to make things that are a little more nationalistic. And I don't know if what happened with Kojima, with Konami, was exactly all what you've heard. I mean, that's just a conspiracy theory about Kojima. Like, were they like, hey, it might hurt sales if you're this fucking crazy? I had a point earlier I wanted to bring up about VR. And the VR missions, to be specific. I was a big fan of the VR missions games. I loved that too. I loved the mechanics of Metal Gear. And it's funny because if you played a lot of the VR missions before you played the main missions, the dialogue in the game would change from time to time.
No, you're right. I forgot about that.
Specifically, Raiden would mention it more, and Campbell would mention it more to Raiden. Remember, you did this in VR. I mean, but I feel like that he signed off on that, to be like, well, this is creating more immersion into the simulation itself and to the VR training of the game. And like, you are literally VR training to play the game, which is not just Raiden doing VR training, but you are doing VR training now. You're being trained in the way that Raiden's being trained. And it's just kind of funny if you think about it that way, because it's almost like you are getting better at killing.
The VR stuff could have been something that we could have just made a podcast on its own. Chris, what are your final thoughts you really need to touch on?
First off, I think it's important to play Metal Gear Solid 2 again.
Yes.
Watching videos is fine to a degree, but there needs to be that interaction in order to get the full effect. And in that interaction, there is a strong message there. Like, Kojima has always made anti-military and military games. And this one steps beyond just the military into a broader societal critique, partially because of the ways in which American society has always been militarized. America as a country exists because of bloody revolution. America is so focused on conflict that it valorizes its civil war. And that is why these societal discussions are important in an anti-military military game, because it requires a reflection on our relationship to technology, but also our relationship to military structures and societal violence. And so that is why Metal Gear Solid 2 is even, oh dear Lord, almost 25 years later, still an incredibly important game.
I think all of us, the first time we played it, we just sort of said, what is this game? This is not the first game. I don't enjoy this as much. The game has aged arguably, I would say, better than all the other games in the series. All right, Cody,
Absolutely.
what would be your last points that you would really like to make?
Um, 20 something days after the release of Metal Gear Solid 2 was the attack on 9/11, which ultimately led to the Patriot Act, which is a
Mhm.
huge pun in this situation.
I love the irony in that situation, but you're 100% right. They had to rush. I forget if they had to pull the game off shelves yet or not, but they had to, at the very least, have no reference to the Twin Towers because they were literally in New York at the time.
Yeah, they
Yeah.
didn't pull the game off shelves, but they were talking about it because of how the ending, and how Arsenal Gear crashes into the Federal Building, because
Mhm.
it seemed too similar to what actually happened. They
Mhm.
decided to go with it because of the impact it would have on the story and the themes surrounding it. There's a reason he chose the Federal Building, and there's a reason there's that destruction there.
Yes.
But
Yeah.
they did have to rush to remove the World Trade Center, yes.
Which gave the most powerful country in the world at the time, specifically, um, carte blanche to spy on its citizens, which is an exact reference to Metal Gear Solid 2, uh, and the Metal Gear Solid games in general. And since then, the entire intelligence community has been based around that and emboldened by it and allowed to do so much more, all the way up to the Edward Snowden incidents and all those things, where we have seen Metal Gear Solid 2 slowly but surely coming true in real time. When I played the game the first time, it had a huge impact on me, but like you said, oh man, this isn't the same, but it grows on you and you think about it. And in retrospect, the game absolutely did prophesize so much, and it's still coming true. That it's kind of terrifying.
I know there's a lot of people out there, for whatever reason or another, just you don't like Metal Gear Solid 2. I can't fault you for that. But give it another chance. Play through it again. The controls are tight, the game is fun, and the story is just, there's no other game like it. There really isn't.
Yeah, he was trolling you too. I mean, you're meant to not like Raiden.
Yeah,
He's meant
you
to
are
kill you.
absolutely meant to not like Raiden in any shape or form. I love it because correct me if I'm wrong here, but when Sons of Liberty came out, there was no option to choose the tanker or the big shell episodes. They were basically put together.
I think so. Yeah, I believe you're right.
Uh, sort of. You could unlock it after you beat the game
Right.
the first time.
There we go.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Whereas in the subsequent releases of it, you can choose, because most people knew by that point that you're not playing as Snake most of the time. Kojima, you're a mad genius. Thank you for producing some of my all-time favorite games. So that wraps up today's episode of Matt's Digital Odyssey. What do you think? Was Metal Gear Solid 2 simply ahead of its time, or are we just now living in the world it predicted? The parallels between the game and today's reality are just absolutely hard to ignore. And it raises the question, how much of our digital reality is still in our control? Let's keep the conversation going. Hit me up on social media at Marlat Media. A huge thanks to Chris and Cody for taking the time to join me. Chris, it's always great having you on. Your insights really help break down some of the deeper themes. And Cody, thank you for bringing your perspective on the discussion. It was awesome having you as well. Next time, I'm going at it alone again with a lighter topic: video game backlogs, both digital and physical. They seem to be never ending, and since we're adults who don't have time to play them, they just keep growing. But if you out there listening prefer the roundtable style more, let me know. Until then, keep exploring, keep dreaming, and I'll see you on the next Odyssey.